welcome to episode 4 of the Habemus Podcast, a podcast about HBO's The Young Pope, where we watch The Young Pope and then we talk about it. My name, of course, is Tristan, and alongside me, as always, is co-host and friend Harrison Milo Rahajason. What's up, man?
I'm doing all right. We just watched that episode, and I'm kind of a little bit shook by it. It was a weird one.
It was a weird one.
Otherwise, I'm doing well.
Our guest viewer for today is David Rudin. What's up, David?
What did we just watch?
What?
Oh my God.
What just happened?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I'm really kind of still don't like a lot of these scenes. Kind of seem like a puzzle that doesn't quite work properly. They're weirdly assembled, and there's no cohesion. There's no strength. There's no comment that goes throughout the whole thing, so to speak.
No.
This episode is just so weird.
Before we get into the show, David, one of the particularities that you have that separates yourself completely from all of our guest viewers is that you watch the whole thing.
The entire series.
And then one interesting thing about you watching the whole thing is that you watched it without subtitles, yet there are a lot of scenes where they speak Italian.
It made sense at the time, or I thought it did, and then watching it again, I was like, I don't know how I made sense of this. but also having now seen it with subtitles, I can't say that it makes any more sense to me. So
Fair enough.
I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
Like I feel like you could get Voyello by like his intonation and just sort of general sliminess.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't recommend watching it without subtitles, but
I would not.
And that first scene with the sheep and Tonino, did that suddenly make sense to you today, or did that make sense to you at the time as well?
I mean, it's like a hospital in a field and there's a man with sheep.
It inherently makes no sense.
Like the issue there is not subtitles.
No. Absolutely not.
That's the episode.
Harrison,
Harrison,
before we start, would you like to briefly explain what the 3 segments for this show is?
Absolutely. So, segment number 1, highlight. So, what you thought was the best part of the show? What did you like the most about it? Then segment number 2 is the lowlight. So what did you think sucked? And I mean, I guess that's going to be the longest segment of today's episode.
Yep.
And then the third segment is your Cherry Coke character of the episode. So who shined the brightest in the show? And it could be for any reason. So it's because you thought they were great or because you thought they were particularly crappy.
So tradition on the show is to have our guest viewers start. So David, what was your highlight of episode 4?
Wow, this is going to be a short segment. I will give it, there is a scene where I guess we are to believe that the Pope prays a conception into happening.
Yep.
Which is to say that he is outside the window as one of the guards and his wife have sex in the window, and he is having a rather sexual experience praying for them to conceive.
Yep.
I don't know. I'm trying to come up with like a logical and almost appropriate explanation of what happened.
Well,
that's the best I can do.
He has a prayergasm kind of, like
prayergasm.
As the Swiss guard has an actual orgasm, he's kind of there like, oh, you must, and it's like.
But it's like a repeat from his how he says that he got the papacy.
That's right.
Where he keeps repeating. I'm not quite sure what he repeats, but
me,
or choose me or something,
yeah.
and then he gets it.
Yeah,
so that's
right.
his way. But like, what a dick though. He goes and tells that character, which I always forget her name.
Esther.
In my mind, she's more of the injured lamb. Mm-hmm. But anyways, so he shows how to pray, or he teaches Esther how to pray.
Yeah.
And he's like, it shouldn't be a list of requests. And then literally like 10 minutes later,
makes
makes a list of requests.
Emphatically so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Harrison, what was your highlight?
My highlight, absolutely. So this one's easy. It's the really cheesy Italian show where they have Tonino on explain the whole thing of why he can perform miracles, and he's talking about how some soccer players came and the guy had a torn meniscus, was on the bench, but then suddenly was cured and scored 2 goals off of his wrong foot. Okay, so the thing I appreciate the most about that scene is how, like, if you've ever seen actual daytime Italian television, that's exactly what it looks like.
Exactly.
Very cheesy. People that are just like way too, like, it's just like way too overdone. The entire thing is way overdone, and you have someone, and you have some weird guest, and they just talk about weird things. And this show was like they managed to really very, very, very accurately recreate what that actually looks like. And then just that thing with the soccer player is just hysterical. That's
so many soccer references in this episode.
Yeah. Also when Voyello was showing the Greenland Prime Minister the phones and saying, "This is my player. This is this play." It's absurd.
It really is absurd.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's one thing that I love about the Young Pope is just the Italianness of the show is it's insane.
Incredible.
And I was gonna say that, so I'm not gonna say that. And usually my highlights are monologues from Pius the 13th, where he's being like a dick to someone, but in like a very like I'm showing you that I'm winning this argument kind of way. Yeah. Which are typically my favorite moments in this show, but there wasn't in this episode. So I'll put the very extra scene at the start of the episode where Tutino Petola sees the sheep and just goes crazy, and everybody on the other side of the field just like, oh my god, this is amazing.
But why does it start with a horse?
This show was so insane. This scene was so insane. It was actually no, I think intense is the right word.
And I think the most, like, my favorite part of that scene is you have the guy who's like the younger guy who's like in jeans with a denim jacket, and he's just like on his phone in the background, like, I don't give a shit about what's actually happening.
With the speaker on the top of his car.
That was amazing.
It's like they had like random like hospital beds at a field.
People with a catheter and stuff.
None of it really, like, I was still vaguely convinced it was a dream for most of it.
Yeah. Also, I think the fields thing, so there were 2 moments in this episode that were like, I think almost that were meant to be very obvious references to The Godfather. So there's a lot of like field scenes in The Godfather, and also the one where where Voyello is talking to Esther about how she has sinned. There's even like that violin music that kind of sounds like The Godfather music. So I feel like that might be a thing, but I don't know.
I feel like Voyello would have seen The Godfather too.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He oh my god. He just like he just walks around thinking he's like characters from The Godfather.
Yeah.
Oh man. All right, so that concludes segment 1. We're gonna take a short break, and we're gonna come back with the lowlights.
I'm Tom Zalatni, host and producer of Up for Discussion, a long-running comedy podcast on the Upford Network. Every week, me and my team of hilarious improvisers use audience-submitted questions to dive deep and delicious into every topic under the sun. Nothing is off limits. The audience has full control. It's like going to an improv show, only it's in your ears, and nobody's asking to see a scene about sex toys. Hopefully. One reviewer called it an underappreciated cult classic. Another reviewer called it not a very compelling product. Go check it out and see for yourself. The Up for Discussion podcast. Available wherever fine podcasts are sold.
And we're back here on episode 4 with the lowlights. David, there are a few lowlights in this episode.
So many. Too many to name.
I had trouble coming up with a highlight.
Yep.
Yeah.
None of it made any sense.
No.
On a scene-by-scene basis, I kind of enjoy it.
Okay.
Like, there are some episodes in the show that make sense to me, to the extent that the show makes sense. Like, there are large stretches of this episode that having seen the episodes that come after, I still have no idea why any of this is happening.
Same.
But I think my lowlight is probably still just Pope Pius XIII talking to his PR person in his personal bathroom.
Oh, yeah.
Just for sort of the, like, randomness of the dialogue and just how over the top it is. You know, I choose to answer with silence. It's like...
Yeah.
Like, all the dialogue in the show is, like, sort of unnatural and extra.
Yeah.
But this is just the bit where it tips over it to sort of, like, outright parody.
Yeah, it's true. And, like, the thing that's weird about that scene, too, is that they're, like, in the doorway where the Greenland Prime Minister is right there in front of them. And apparently they don't see that the Pope is standing right there, visible. And somehow, like, those two things are separate. Like, you have the people that are in the room, and then you have the conversation between Sophia and the Pope that are in the doorway. And I'm just like, this is...
Well, Voyella's distracting her with the Napoli squad.
There
we go.
Yeah.
Showing her who Hamshik is.
It's so strange.
Oh, God.
Strange. Yeah, he is Slovakian.
With a mohawk. I mean.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Oh, my goodness.
Harrison.
There are a lot. This is going to be a tough one, but I think I know. And it's that really weird trip that Gutierrez has at the end, where it's kind of like, what is happening, and the way that whole episode ends, except for the dancing Greenland Prime Minister. That I like. But
yeah, that's an interesting way of ending a show.
But that whole scene where there's there's almost no talking. He's kind of saying the boy has become a man, and that's repeated. We don't know if it's real or not. And then suddenly there's this nun who like sprawls some pictures out, and like we don't know who those pictures are. And having seen the rest of the series, we don't ever find out. It's inexplicable. It
is unnecessary.
Is it
in my
artsy,
mind.
or do they have to feel contractual? They have a contractual obligation to make the episode over 55 minutes, so they needed some bullshit scene. Like, I don't get it. It was horrible.
And the whole scene seems like it's like in slow motion.
Yeah.
It's
and like you're just there, like it's not even suspenseful because there's like the episode's almost done. You don't know what's about. There's no cliffhanger that you're expecting. He says, okay, you're gonna be the one going to New York. Very important for the rest of the series, because that is the most important subplot is the Kurtwell case. So super important. You might want to talk about that a little bit, but no, it's some weird trip where Gutierrez is like, that was my.
We're just gonna handle the entirety of that case, which is like the most important subplot in one episode and ignored in all the others.
Yeah.
Exactly. It is the most important subplot.
Yeah, it is.
And I don't know. I still think that Gutierrez is on a absinthe trip.
Very possible.
In that scene, and I still think for a functioning alcoholic, he seems so steady.
Yeah.
Walking around, he's like a stick.
Yeah.
Which is kind of surprising to me. I honestly, I think my lowlight is like a combination of like all of the scenes that were clearly like HBO sexiness between Esther and the Pope, where she's like praying in the pool and he's like seeing, and Valente's like behind him, and then there's another one where she's like, it's clearly like just 3 seconds of Esther praying while she's completely naked, and then the third one, which is basically them fucking. And the Pope's in another room, like almost another room, like outside the house, but he's like super close, and he's like...
He can see the whole thing.
Yeah, well, he's
feeling it.
Oh, wait.
Definitely.
This episode was very horny. This was the horny episode.
It's the horniest of episodes.
Yeah.
I mean,
definitely.
Like it is HBO.
It is HBO.
Nudity, but the show doesn't actually have a ton of it, and it kind of feels like they just sort of met all of their contractual obligations.
Yeah.
By just having Esther be like gratuitously inappropriate every time she prayed.
She's praying and her arms are over her nipples, and you're like, okay, so but why? I don't get why this is this.
Hasn't the Pope just taught her how to pray?
Yeah.
And fresh off prayer lessons with the Pope.
Yeah. That's the first thing that she thinks of. Well, but we do know that we do know that she has a crush on him at least. But that doesn't explain that scene at all. Nothing explains that scene. This episode made no sense. Oh, also, honorable mention for like something that was really funny in this episode. was when with the baptisms.
Oh, yeah.
And there was the clearly adopted child. She takes after you. That was great.
Yeah. I mean, if I can say one thing about that Esther subplot, that we kind of like hinted throughout, like from episode 2 all the way.
Yeah.
Like, if HBO was like, if those scenes are just her character in general was to bring that HBO like HBO provocativeness, they should have found a way to like make it a little less like here's the HBO, like let's they probably should have had another character or maybe another character that could have like spread it out, because she's the only one.
You're asking for nuance?
Maybe.
It's just very confusing that she lives, in like the Vatican City and seems completely confused. In this episode, she learns how to pray.
Yeah.
She's married to a Vatican guard. Like, there's prayer happening around. She's like in their backyard praying in like a swimming pool. Like,
and then
they did not just move here.
Yeah.
Like she appears to have picked nothing up at the Vatican before where this episode begins.
Clearly not. Also, like,
No.
a lot of voyeurism. Like, I think you were mentioning that. I don't think you're allowed to do that in the Vatican.
There was the whole lip reading thing, which was like really strange.
Okay, so to be fair, I think part of her being inappropriate is that, am I remembering right that she's sort of a bit of a honey trap set by
she's
So like I think she may actually know better than like praying in the like kiddie pool as Pius the 13th walks by. But it's Voyela's craftier than that, so you'd think that he'd have come up with a better plan. So this is just
he does.
not having a clue.
And he does. This spying thing becomes much more sophisticated in the next few episodes.
Yeah.
But all that to say that Voyela's starting to set the traps, and you kind of like want to know what's going to happen, but they really delay it, and I'm not going to spoil it, but like what it amounts to is like disappointing.
Yeah. Anyways, so we're going to take our second break, and then we're coming back with our last, the moment everybody's been waiting for.
Yeah.
I'm Julian McKenzie, co-host of the Scrum Podcast, a sports show I'm doing with my podcasting partner in crime, Tristan D'Amour, on the Up4 network. Every week, we analyze something different from the Canadian sports media landscape: lack of diversity, getting a job in the field, coverage of different sports, and answering some of the harder questions. Through a combination of back-and-forth discussion and high-profile guest interviews, we're aiming to figure out exactly what's up in the world of sports. Find us wherever podcasts are sold: iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, SoundCloud, Message in a Bottle, Morse Code, Telegram, Singing Telegram, Target, Walgreens, Bird's Nest, Dad's Shed, and a crowded convention center bathroom.
And we're back with the Cherry Coke character of the episode. So we watch the episode, we find a character. It could be Lenny, it could be the biggest character, it could be a small character that was only there for a second but was memorable. David, what was your character of the episode?
We discussed this, so we agreed Voyela's off limits, because then we just all agree, right?
I think that this could be an episode specific rule. But I think in this episode, Voyela's off the table, because he was very obviously the best character in sense.
When everything's going wrong, you can still count on Voyela to just chew all the scenery.
Absolutely.
If it's not Voyela, I will go with the Prime Minister of Greenland.
Wow, that's a good pick.
I mean, it's a bit of a hot take.
No. That's a good pick.
All she does is sort of just be very awkward and ends the episode by just dancing in the distance through the credits.
It's so good. That's a great reason.
But yeah, she's just barely holding it together in all of her scenes, which are the most awkward scenes in the episode.
Yeah.
And it's sort of unclear if at any given point if she's like scared or flirting with Stallone.
Yeah.
They seem very unclear on sort of all things Greenland. I don't think they did a ton of research
And I think that that's a really good pick because she doesn't appear much in the episode, but she's kind of like a really good foil to for Pius XIII because like they present her as being kind of innocent and like doesn't kind of unassuming, but when asked about the whole when the Pope asks her what's under all the ice, he's like, well, what if it's God? And then she's kind of like, what?
And then it lingers until the song
That's
plays.
But also, before that, when he's asking her, like, what's under all that ice? Like, it sounds like a pickup line.
Oh my...
The first time you hear it, and there's a pause on that beat. And everyone's like, everyone's like, the Pope's being inappropriate and horny again. And you kind of have, I think it's a cut to Voyella. It's like, got him. He's like, I think it's God.
That is genius.
Right, which gets at sort of the awkwardness of it, which is the first few episodes of the show kind of are hinting at, like, this isn't a normal Pope. Like,
Yeah.
can I swear?
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
Like the pitch of the show when it's advertised, right? It's like, this Pope fucks.
Yeah.
And then it turns out that he's actually just super religious.
Super religious.
I don't think that's much of a spoiler. But
He's horny too.
But there's sort of enough double entendre, and even when he's being super religious, it sounds super horny. And she's just there, and like you have this sort of read on her face where like she's trying to process if the Pope is just being weird or if the Pope's being super horny.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, what's under all that ice? It's like, I think it's God.
Oh my God.
And then an awkward pause. For like what seems to be like 10 seconds. Like
it feels like
it's
a half
long.
hour.
It's long.
It feels like an eternity.
Yeah.
Like really an eternity.
10 seconds is probably too much, but still. Yeah.
The show is willing to do the awkward pause, though.
Oh,
yeah.
It very much is. Yeah.
They don't have to pause for a break, right? They don't have to like do a commercial break, which I guess that's all to their advantage.
Yeah, it's HBO.
Harrison?
Okay, so what I'm now realizing, and what I was realizing while watching the episode, is that none of these characters, except for Voyello, none of the characters are really like very well developed in this episode, which is why I think that the Green Line Prime Minister is such a great
Nothing happens in this episode.
Yeah, because nothing really happened. So
happens.
I'm going through my other than Voyello, I'm going through my mind and I'm thinking, okay, so was Sophia good? I mean, we barely see her, and in the one scene she is just like, I'm going to answer that with silence or whatever. Is Gutierrez good? No, This is the one episode Gutierrez sucks. He sucks in this episode. He's very disappointing in this episode. So that leaves me. So the two other people we hear a lot from in this episode. That leaves me with the Pope and the Sri Lankan nun Siri. So, and between the two, I'm very, because like the Pope was so terrible in this episode in every single way, I'm going to say Siri almost by process of elimination.
Wow.
Because we don't hear from her after this. We hear from her a bit before this. And really the one scene that I thought was really good was when she's crying over her dead sister's casket and the Pope is like, stop crying, we should stop crying at funerals. She looks at him in the face and then she keeps crying, and I was like, okay, yeah, that's
bold.
That's bold. That's good. And I mean, if your sister just died and you uncontrollably need to cry, you're gonna cry. Also, that scene with the hearing aid at the beginning, where she explains how she found God by some drunk German dude in a bar who's like, God helps the poor and you're poor, so you should find God. And then next thing you know, she's at the Vatican. I think that's...
Also, like, the hearing aid thing, I didn't get the whole audio thing, until like, the very end, and I was like, that's pretty clever.
Yeah, but I was like, is my computer fucked up? Like, what's the problem? Yeah.
Maybe that probably shouldn't have been the first scene, or, like, one of the few first scenes.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. So, I had two other... I mean, like... I was like, should Tutino Petola, that crazy guy, be like my character of the episode? So I'll give him the honorable mention because I think he's just so extra in the few scenes. But I'm gonna give it to the Italian talk show host.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Because
that's a great pick.
Because she's fantastic. She's fantastic in like the 30 seconds that she's on?
No. That scene drags a bit.
That scene is quite long.
Yeah. And she like single-handedly just like forces him to like talk directly to the Pope through like cameras, and I feel like that's awesome.
And I feel like she didn't believe anything, because I feel like she was like kind of like playing with him a little bit, like giving him the satisfaction, because she's like, oh, you saw the Madonna, wow. Like, she doesn't actually believe any of this, but she has to because she's on TV. I love like how artificial that entire thing seems.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good pick.
Yeah, that scene is like, it reads like satire, then you realize that is TV in much of Europe.
And then plus, so she's like, the TV host says, address the cardinals. Maybe even the Pope is watching. And then the Pope is half asleep with a cigarette in his mouth, just like kind of watching this, and he has no reaction. And then the scene just ends. And while you have this guy pleading to you with like holes in his hands or whatever, that scene is magical, yeah.
And she's like, I can see it. They are. I don't know what
They are
the
real,
words for holes, but
Stigmata or whatever.
they are real. And oh my god, she's just like.
And what did you see? The Madonna? He saw the Madonna, full of light.
Exactly. So at the end of usually at the end, because when people have not seen the show, we usually ask, did you like the show and are you gonna watch it? But you've watched it.
But we can.
But I think the flip side of that question is to ask what Verity Stevenson asked us in the very first episode. Do you think that The Young Pope is a satire?
I think there's a lot of it that is satirical. But I think what's weird about The Young Pope is that for all that it's absurd, it does kind of take religion and faith very seriously, while also being sort of crazy and quite dumb.
Yeah.
So like on a scene-by-scene basis, I think you could argue it's a satire, but the overall thing actually takes the sincerity of people's belief in religious faith quite seriously. And I'm not sure how you square that with it being a satire.
No.
I think it is kind of trying to have it both ways, but like whereas other Paolo Sorrentino movies like use priests as ridiculous characters who are clearly corrupt and stuff, this one sort of, you have slimy Voyello who is sort of like the villain from a Disney movie.
Yeah.
But it also believes in, the sincerity of Gutierrez. It, on some level, believes in Letty's sincerity, if not completely.
Yeah.
Like, that stuff clearly isn't satire. I think it's absurdist. But it's not like a satire. I don't think it's like mocking their faith.
Do you think it's possible that because this show was made by Europeans and we're not necessarily Europeans and we don't watch a lot of European shows, that we just don't get it because it's a different way of making a show?
It is Canal Plus, Sky, and HBO. So it's like...
I mean, like I'm a fan of the directors. Like I've seen his other stuff, and this takes faith way more seriously than like a bunch of his other movies do. Where like priests and mobsters are basically equated to one another.
I think in this show, the priests are the mobsters.
I mean, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, and almost like in this episode, almost explicitly.
No, in this episode, right? Like Voyella's doing the Godfather stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's a satire. I think it's like there is a sort of an absurdity to it. Like I think it's like magic realism and like absurdist. But I don't think it's actually sort of mocking the Vatican as much or faith as much as it sets out to do. And I think that is sort of coming back to the show, like a year and a half after it aired.
Yeah.
Right, it's like when it came out, you're like, this Pope is like young and hot and probably had sex. Like the soundtrack to the show has like electro on it. You're like, well, this is gonna be
a joke. Like
making fun of it, and then it's like, not this episode, because this episode is a hot mess, but it's like oddly sincere in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I think it is like trying to have it both ways. Like, the opening credits are very much in on the joke, and it is in on a lot of its own jokes, but I don't think the joke is really on its characters or what they believe.
And I think that Voyello's character in general kind of does have it both ways, where you have those Godfather scenes, but in the same episode you have the allusion to the statue thing, which we know that like the statue makes him incredibly horny. And in this episode, also you have him showing the phones with the soccer players, and like he's kind of just this like huge geek who like just is kind of lame and like doesn't really get it, but at the same time he's like incredibly like serious about religion, and also he is not afraid of using his power to like blackmail people and to actually make people try to, you know, trap someone in a scandal. And yeah, I think that it just in that one character he embodies the like both wayness of what you're trying to describe.
All right, so but right before we end this, there's going to be a new like series.
Yeah,
but it's not going to be called. It's going to be called the New Pope. Have you heard about this? And are you in? Will you be watching that thing when it comes out?
Oh yeah, I'll watch it. Like I'm in for the long haul with this franchise.
I've been reeled in.
I'm prepared to just be messed with and disappointed, and like I think this series, not this episode, which is a hot mess, but like this series overall kind of narrowly pulls it out at the last minute and actually sort of and kind of gets it right, but like I'm not sure I would bet on them almost pulling it off twice.
Yeah.
Well, to bounce off Tristan's question about like the show, like now that you've seen the show with the subtitles, are you going to rewatch the rest of the episodes?
I've considered doing it before. I might.
Okay.
I mean, there aren't a lot in this one. Like, I feel like you could get the Italian TV show because the host is so over the top.
Yeah.
You could get it without, right? Because she's playing it for farce. Like, you could get that without subtitles.
Oh, yeah.
But I feel like to get more of Voyello, who I love dearly,
Yeah.
I should probably rewatch it.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think luckily it really goes uphill from here. The episode 5 is like I think the best episode in the series, and it just like you have the introduction of the Kurtwell case, which is important and I think well done, and you have the at long last conclusion of the Esther case, which is just like get out of this show, like I don't want to hear about this anymore. So you have the introduction of the other guy, the other person who was in the orphanage with you know, when he goes to like Guatemala or whatever, like
let's not spoil that part.
But you know, it gets better from here. So if you're gonna watch it, I guess.
Right, like without spoiling it, I think one of the things that's sort of weird is that like it doesn't look like TV and it doesn't feel like TV, but it's also doing some TV stuff where you have sort of plots that are just like stalling for time. Read Esther, or
like we don't see Spencer in this one.
Sure, we don't see Spencer.
And I guess it's not a spoiler that we know what's coming from the end of this, that, you know, Gutierrez in America is like sort of that like one-off episode that just follows sort of a secondary character, the very TV thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's a really weird balancing act.
Yeah.
This episode, I think we've agreed, does not do it.
No,
like,
this one falls.
You know, to your previous
short.
question, like, I will watch the second season, but I would not bet on them getting it right twice, even though I love everyone involved in it.
So maybe the anticipation of it bombing is also worth something?
I mean, there's a version of this that's a total failure that's also would be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
well, because then we can make another podcast and just like slam every episode once it comes out. That's a thing to look forward to, I guess.
I guess so.
I'd put it to you, because you've watched more of these episodes of late, right? Like, if this show was 10% worse, it would be completely different, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, it's so close to that line that if it were just slightly worse.
But it's like playing with the line.
I think one thing that makes it actually so appealing is like how, when you even mentioned how like beautiful the actual like visuals are, it's like beautifully shot and
it's super well made.
Yeah. Like
I think that's what reels you in.
Yeah, we cannot knock the production value, and plus you're in the Vatican, and like it's like I know it's not shot there, but like all these things, it's very beautiful. It's a very visually appealing show.
Yeah.
It just kind of sucks.
Yeah. It just kinda.
Yeah, it doesn't all the way suck. But it like mostly.
But I remember really liking it the first time I watched it. Though.
But now we're getting really deep into it.
Well, I mean, I wasn't analyzing every episode after watching them either.
And you know, this before we even recorded the first episode of this podcast, when we were confronted with that question, is this a satire? that made me think of it.
But that's a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, it really
that
is.
From episode 1, someone came in and asked us if that was a satire, and like not in a very like, is this a satire?
Yeah.
Verity came in and said, "You guys,
This is a satire.
This is a satire, right?"
Yeah.
And it kind of changed the way we're watching the show.
But I'm really happy.
I disagree with her. It was like the completely valid argument, right? That
I'm happy, but I'm also happy that like when you came in, you very obviously knew that there's something up with this show. Whereas before, I was like, there's nothing funny about this show. This is the most unfunny show on earth. It has no comedic value. It is very serious. It is even to a fault serious.
That was too much on the other side.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Well, part of it is like, you get like an Academy Award-winning director, you get HBO, you get beautiful shots, like all the signals here are like, this is a prestige show, and I think it is a prestige show, but it's in on the joke in the sense that it knows that a lot of these like signifiers of prestige are being deployed in service of something that's kind of silly.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I disagree with Verity that makes it a satire, but there is humor here.
Yeah, there is. Yeah. There is. All right, well, on that note, David, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
To talk about the young Pope.
Good luck the rest of the way.
We will soldier through. Before we end, we would like to thank Aiden Locke for creating the logo, as always, and producer Tom and everyone at the Up4 Network who houses us. You want to say any last words, Harrison?
This episode sucked.
This episode sucked. It really did. But we will be back with episode 5 at some point. We might take a week's break because I'm in Europe. But anyways, on that note, we'll hear you on next time.
The young coach?